in 2019, when I had a spiritual experience, I had this realization that everything is perfect. Every human being fits perfectly in this reality. Nothing can be excluded. This Western culture is so focused on pursuing the establishment of this ideal world, that attempt to create a better world, how noble it might be, immediately gives rise to the suggestion that there is also something undesirable that we need to get rid of. When I see political leaders trying to make sense of the situation we collectively find ourselves in, now with the pandemic and in the near future with the consequences of climate change, I wonder who will be the casualties of that ideal world we pursue. Question: how do we resolve this paradox of an already perfect world with this current state of affairs? Well, I think what we have spoken earlier already redresses this, redresses the perspective that what is happening right now, somehow a visceral manifestation of something which will bring about a number of casualties, as you have put here, makes you wonder who will be the casualties of the ideal world we pursue. I don't know whether the so-called Western culture pursues some ideal world. Yes, there are these perspectives that even Nietzsche addressed in his The Birth of Greek Tragedy, where he divided the energies of Apollo and Dionysius into the Apollonian and Dionysian forces, and that arguing that the world in the West took that Apollonian approach, shunning away from and being afraid of that other side, inevitably what connects us to the nature that Dionysian spirit represents. So yes, in philosophical discourses this is very well known, that Apollo represents harmony, order, medicine, music, and so forth. It represents order. This attempt to create order is in itself part of what it means to be human. Not going to give this analysis to the Nietzschean perspective on Dionysian and Apollonian and the spirits that they represent, whether that is true or not. One can argue that that may be true, and our world is sick because of that. Because we denied at a very early phase in our current civilization our connection to that, what the Dionysian wild force here represents. And in denying so, we sent into repression a tremendous portion of our psyche, which is forever unknown to us, and therefore we are forever under a spell of its shadow. But in terms of that pursuing the ideal world, in itself can be seen as from the fractal point of view, from the point of view of fractals, how systems replicate themselves, that desire to coexist, that desire to structure and build, that desire to create, because these are all aspects, signature of what human being here is. Human being is the only creature, the only earthling, which created and constantly creates that artifice. There are many other colonies of species that live in highly organized, we could say, colony-like systems, but they don't create that artifice. They don't create something, anything other than what is already an organic environment for their existence. Only human beings do. So in other words, analyzing this only from the perspective of ideal world as being that a desired goal, I think has been already reviewed critically within the very core of Western civilization. I think this is being redressed and addressed by many thinkers, psychologists, scientists, artists certainly. But who will be the casualties of the ideal world we pursue? You know that casualties are always the same. Casualty here is not what we may think and consider them to be casualties. There's only one casualty. There's a casualty of ignorance. There's no other casualty. The only casualty here, whatever happens in the world, is remaining in that what is not knowing its essence. So whatever the set of circumstances, whatever and how, in whichever way this may pan out itself, the joke is always on itself. There is no other casualty out there. So I don't want to go and entertain the conversation at that level, which will defeat the very purpose of me relating something here. Who will be casualties? Yes, and we're going to enter the polemics. Yes, who will be the minorities? Who will be the next gypsies? Who will be the next, right? What is the next ghetto? Who is going? We are all into it. Suffering touches absolutely everyone equally. Go back to the teachings of Christ, the authentic teachings of Christ. It doesn't matter. The compassion of Christ is compassion to the state of ignorance. The compassion of Buddha is the compassion to the state of ignorance. It's not the compassion to the so-called oppressed. Everyone is oppressed in the ignorance. Oppressor and the oppressed, victim and perpetrator are locked into the same cycle of oppression and abuse because of that status of ignorance. That is the core of the teaching of those aforementioned masters. Whatever happens to our world right now, always there's light that illumines it. Rest in that light and see what it illumines. Rest in that light and see what it illumines. In the darkest hour of the night, the only thing is certain, that the dawn is coming. So the beauty, if you forgive me, of the darkest hour is the very promise of the rising sun. This is the way of consciousness. This is the way of how things are. Everything else, I'm afraid, is a speculation of mind which has that same propensity to be taken out of its seat and go wild on its exploration of trivialities, no matter how importantly it likes to dress them.